You're listening to Were You Still Talking?
They pump out your blood and they pump in a new batch of blood, and all of it is the blood of children.
All the big stars are going to be on TV now. I mean, it's just the way it's going. Your role, I think, will be played by Brad Pitt.
What'd you wear?
I wore my loincloth wrapped around my feet.
Are you going by Jon today?
And that's absolutely true. You feel it in every cell in your body.
Yeah, you can bend the truth and bend the visualizations no matter what your political affiliation.
You could have an alpaca. A girlfriend's daughter recently got married and they had llamas or alpacas at the wedding.
A recording room. They recorded a couple songs in the kitchen of Rumbo.
So, wait, you microdosed before this, right?
What? Hey, welcome back. This is Were You Still Talking? And it is 5 a.m. in the morning, and no, it isn't. It's not. Don't believe anything I say. This is Joel Albrecht, and today on the show we have Stephen Jenkins. He's a self-described recovering piano student. Anyone can relate to that, who helps people with busy schedules learn piano in a unique way that does not require them to take lessons. This is pretty interesting. After quitting piano lessons 5 times and spending nearly a decade of research on research and development, Stephen developed a patented method that simplifies music theory and reduces stress and anxiety. This is pretty interesting stuff. We may even get to it. Steve, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good, Joel. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. So you're in Texas, is that right?
Yes, I am. I'm right in Arlington, Texas right now.
Oh, in Arlington. All right. And what's it like there today?
It's pretty good weather. It's getting a little warmer this time of year, in the 80s, you know.
Man, okay. We're in the middle of a heat wave for us. It's barely summer, and it's going to be 90 today and even hotter tomorrow, which is pretty rare for where I'm at. So I'm in the west side of Oregon, so it usually doesn't get this hot. Yeah, wow. West side of Oregon.
It's like we switched, areas, right? Texas is normally hotter than.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, normally it'd be a lot hotter in Texas, but the country's having a heat wave.
Yep.
So really nice to have you on the show. Thanks for getting in touch. And how did you hear about the show? I'm always curious how people heard about the podcast, and because you're one of my early guests that have reached out and got a hold of me just blindly. I haven't actually answered all those emails.
So many emails, right? Well, that's a good question. I have been a lover of podcasts for years and years before they were the thing, and just fumbling through and came across your podcast. The name is actually what stood out to me. Were you still talking? I was like, well, what is that about? I got to hear this. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good to hear, because it's so hard to come up with a name, and a friend of mine helped him with that. I'm sure I got to point that out, or he will never help me name another podcast. But he's been on the podcast a few times. He may be going by Jon today, and yeah. So that's great. It's good to hear that people are discovering it now. So. Absolutely. I was curious about the piano. You quit piano. You started 5. If you quit, what, 3 times?
No, I quit 5 times.
5 times.
5 times.
Which means you started 5 times.
Started 5 times. And, I think I might have the record for that. If any, there's a lot of people that quit piano, but how many quit 5 times? How many start 5 times, right?
It's true. That's a lot of tenacity. Not only what made you go back, but what made you stop?
Well, what made me stop tends to be the same thing, it in a different sense though. When I was a kid is when I first started taking piano lessons, and I was forced, to do so by my mother. I love her, and I thank her for it because she got this started, right? But like many children who are forced to eat food that they don't like to eat, even though it's good for you, if you don't want to do it at the time, it's just not going to work. You're going to resist against it. So I made a little progress, but as soon as I could, I was out.
So was it? Did you enjoy any part of it, or was it just like, no, this is not for me? I don't. Why would I learn piano?
Right. Yeah, I love piano. Even back then, I remember seeing my grandfather's, piano in his house out in Tyler, Texas, and it kept drawing me to it. And I love piano, I still say, but I just hated the piano lessons. And, in a sense, that's what kept pulling me back throughout the years to the piano.
So when did you go back, like when you were a kid? Were you forced back into lessons? Or like what was kind of the progression of going back and going back? And because I actually started playing trumpet, it ended up being a drummer. So I understand.
Yeah.
I understand about that.
Yeah, and that's interesting. We never know how it's going to end up. But no, the first time I was forced, every other time I went back to it. And that's why I say, even though my mother pushed me in that direction against my will, I'm so glad she did it, because it ended up being really productive. And I love it. So
that's awesome. I mean, how long have you played piano since you figured out how to play? I mean, how to learn.
Right. Every lesson has been a step in the direction, right? But I didn't really find freedom with piano or, get it to a point to where I enjoy it until maybe about 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And piano for me is not something I wanted to study. It's just something I wanted to enjoy playing.
And that's great. That's another good point. And I like that you brought that up because I think that ruins music for a lot of people when they're sort of forced into studying music. I mean, some people love that. Like for some people, that's their jam. The studying part is a big part of it. I think that's a big part of people who become really successful. To me, part of talent is being able to, stay at something for a long, long, long time. But for others, it's not. It's more fun just to have fun. What do you like? What do you like to play? Do you just like to jam on the piano, doing whatever you want, or?
Yeah. The freedom that I found has enabled me actually to enjoy other types of music. When I was a child, I was pretty much learning classical music, or you might even say like the nursery rhymes. You start off playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and then you make it to Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then but as I became an adult, I was more wanting to rock out, jam, play jazz. And then, when I gained that freedom of being able to, I really started to like the classical as well and the standards, just kind of interesting how that happened. It brought me back full circle to where I started.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's really interesting. Some of the almost all of the drummers that I learned from, famous drummers that is, I learned from a lot of drummers. I had drum teachers as well. They almost all played piano. Almost every one of them. I never have learned to play piano. I'm sure it's not too late, but yeah, that's been a big part of some of the best drummers of the world. They seem to all have that in common, that they're also piano players. A lot of them composers as well. So it's definitely the instrument to learn. But it's great that it drew you to other kinds of music that normally that you weren't doing before.
Yeah.
Do you have like favorites, piano players at all, or do you not even listen to that? Do you just listen to music?
I just listen to music. At my age right now, I just kind of generalize music. I don't get into too many niches. I find the beauty in all these different elements, and I take what I like from it. So as a child, as a teenager, I put myself in these different boxes. And, as I grew, I said, no, there's beauty out there to be discovered. So let me widen out a little bit and go find it.
And that's awesome. I mean, it's also great that, well, for one, that you didn't give up, and for another, that you found a different way to learn it, because everyone learns differently. I think that's what turns a lot of people off to music. One thing, I had a drum teacher years ago that basically said, at the beginning or end of your practice, preferably at the end, you should just do whatever you want. Just do whatever, practice for 15 minutes, half hour on whatever you're studying, and then just do what you want. Just play. And I've always thought that was a good philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because people did you find, was that part of it, that you just thought you had a different way of learning than other people?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying because, I think that people do learn in different ways. And a lot of times, in hindsight, as I think through my education, my education was fine, but other people's experience, we're all put in the same class, right? And we're all taught in the same way. And nowadays, people are much more open to understanding that there are different ways to learn. Some people are auditory, some people are visual learners, some people are kinetic, it's just so many different ways to do the same thing. So why force everybody down the same funnel? And when you look at the results for music, I'll say piano, everybody wants to play it, but most people quit when they start.
Right. It's true. I think people get discouraged really easily because it gets hard really fast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, drumming, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You're right, because those lessons, they start off so easy, right? Mm-hmm. Play middle C, play this. You're using two fingers here and there. Chapter 3, lesson 5, it just gets so deep. It's like the jump is so tremendous that it's just way up there, and it's just difficult.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot from people who play. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who started playing drums, and then they realize, well, wait a minute, this gets really hard when you have to keep time,
right,
and play all this stuff.
Right.
Just to sit out on a drum set and bash is great, and everyone should do that. But if you're going to play with a band, then it gets way harder. Harder, real fast. I had a couple of built-in abilities, I guess, because I could keep time. Awesome. That was one talent I had. I could keep time. So that's probably why I kept with it, because that part was easy. But yeah, once I started figuring out that I could make it way easier if I learn more, that's the bizarre thing, is that the more you learn, the easier it can be. You really struggle at first, but if you learn about what you're doing, it can be a lot easier.
It can be, but who sticks around? Most people drop out before. One of the books I love is by Malcolm Gladwell, several books by Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks about it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert, right? Who's got that much time, 10,000 hours to devote to a hobby? For most of us, it's just a hobby, right? It's something we want to do. But for me, I didn't have that much time. So I saw other avenues too.
It's interesting you brought him up, because I have been digesting a whole bunch of his stuff lately. He suddenly showed up everywhere on my YouTube feed. I don't know if you ever go on YouTube, but it takes you down different rabbit holes, and suddenly he was everywhere. So I thought I would, let me get this book. And I was actually a few chapters in before I realized, well, this book's 10 years old or more. That talks about the 10,000 hours. But I think it's interesting. It was great reading the book because it was so much deeper than most people talked about. The 10,000 hours was a way to describe, it wasn't like you're going to be an expert in 10,000 hours. It was more of all these people that you see that, are really good at something. Maybe they're only 12. They put in 10,000 hours. Right. It's not like they just jumped up and said, I can do this. I can fly airplanes.
Right.
Yeah. So it's an interesting theory. And I heard him dissect it a little more in a talk, and it's very, it made a lot of sense to me. I've got more than 10,000 hours in on the drums, but.
See, you made it.
I did. I made it to that point. And it also, because what was important about that is that the amount of time it took you to do 10,000 hours made a big difference. Like one of my favorite drummers is named Dave Weckl, and he's played with hundreds of different jazz people. hundreds. He's an amazing drummer, but he probably got 10,000 hours in like a 5 or 10 year period, like a really short amount of time. Because he sat in his apartment every day for 5 to 10 hours in New York when he was going to school, really putting in the time.
Yeah.
Really putting in the time. So that, I think that makes a difference too. It's just, it's interesting. It's interesting. But I also agree that you do not have to spend 10,000 hours. It's something to have fun. It's so not necessary.
When do we get to let loose and have fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing, Joel, that, I've observed and experienced is in those lessons is very strict, very disciplined about how you do things, how you sit, how you do this, that, and all of those things. I always say it's correct. These people are teaching you the correct way to do things, and it works. However, what that does to some of us is it causes us stress and anxiety, and then that piles up along with the technical aspects of trying to learn. So that's why I call myself a recovering piano student, because I have began to shed all of those preconceived notions about what I have to do to play piano or to enjoy music, really.
Right. And that's great. I think that's a really good concept. I just wanted a little technical note. When you hit your mic, it's really loud. So
yes.
So if people who aren't watching the video, that's the mic being touched. Don't you just not going to cut. I'm not going to edit that out. You're in the middle of saying important stuff. So how did you come on? How did you come up with this idea, this method?
So that's a good question. I started with where I left off from my piano lessons. So I needed a ground floor position to start. So what I did is I took elements of what I learned from sheet music and music theory, but yet I took those things and I started thinking of how can I make this easier? How can I make it simpler to understand? So I just kept breaking down music theory, and it was a very rigid process to get down to the nitty gritty. Basically, I wanted to get so basic that anybody could understand how to play music on a piano.
And how were you still motivated? I guess you really love piano, right? Because, you quit 5 times, you were still motivated to come up with a better way to learn. So I'm guessing you love the instrument. You love music.
Oh yeah. I love music. And when I listen to musicians, you name it, Stevie Wonder, Elton John, I've always been impressed by the blind musicians that can play, because I'm like, I'm not even blind and I can't even do that. I don't know how they do it. And I feel bad because, they're great at it. Right.
Yeah.
And,
that's it. Yeah. Interesting.
But not just them, you got children who are just very fluent at it. But yeah, I love piano. I love guitar. I love drums. I love it all. I just, for whatever reason, piano is the one that I, have invested most of my life to.
So you also do you play guitar and drums as well? Do you play other instruments?
No drums. I picked up guitar a little bit around the time when right before my son was being born, but that was the end of that.
Oh, happy Father's Day.
Oh, thank you.
Who knows when people would be listening to this, but happy Father's Day.
Right.
And happy day after Juneteenth.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I really am shocked that they made that into a national holiday. Yeah, I mean, it's great, but I was just surprised that.
Me too. Big surprise.
Yeah.
Big surprise.
Good thing. Especially a good thing for all the people that got yesterday off.
What was yesterday?
It was Friday. Yesterday was. Wait a minute. No.
It was Saturday.
Friday off. Yesterday was Saturday. Nobody got yesterday off. Everyone worked.
I am so jealous about that.
So are you working now? Are you working at home?
Yeah. Yes.
Is this your main deal?
No, this is not my main deal. This is something that I take very seriously, and I'm working to make it my main deal. So one day, this is my dream, is really to help people to do something like me that I was told I couldn't do, right? Something that I didn't believe that I could do, something that I quit and just kept at it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's totally awesome. And I mean, how can you go into a little bit like how is it different than the traditional way of learning piano?
Absolutely. Yeah. Basically, most people learn piano, when they learn it, they're learning music theory and they're learning sheet music, how to read sheet music. And I compare sheet music to a foreign language that you are trying to learn how to read, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the theory of music theory is very complex. Some people ask, why is piano so difficult to learn? Well, guess what? You got to learn a foreign language, and you can't look at your hands as you're trying to speak that language, right? On the piano, you've got to have a lot of focus. You've got to be somewhat ambidextrous, right? You got to play with your left hand and your right hand, regardless of whether you're right-handed or left-handed. So your brain is trying to do a lot of work. My method simplifies those things because it converts music theory, it converts sheet music into colors and numbers. And it provides basically a template that guides you along the way. It shows you how to play the keys on your piano.
And did you come up with the idea from Guitar Hero at all?
Actually,
sounds like that.
It sounds similar to that, right?
It's similar.
Well,
I always thought that was a really good way for people to learn. That game's pretty cool.
I agree. I think that's cool, but I compare it more to paint by numbers for piano,
mm-hmm.
because it's more of a static template. It's not something that, you have animations and graphics moving around. For some people, that is just too much activity still, right? Those animations and things like that. So I like to keep it simple. And the method is based on the science of simplification.
So did you discover at some point that you were someone who saw things more like in colors? Because I know people do see things different ways. My wife sees things like, if you ask her what kind of car that is, she'll say red. She doesn't see it.
Right.
A Tesla like I do. She sees a blue car. So it's interesting.
Well, yeah, that is interesting. And everybody is different. For me, I observe a lot. I've always been very not cautious, but aware and visually stimulated by color. So I guess you could say that is one of the things that probably went into it.
Yeah, because
go ahead.
I know they're discovering that more and more, is that some people's brains are just more attuned to visual things, and some people's brains are more attuned to audio things, and some people's brains are writing makes more sense, or something on a page, and like we were saying earlier, I hope we were saying this on the podcast, people learn differently, and they do try and make everyone learn the same when you're in school, it's interesting because learning certain things is important if you want to go to college. And it's unfortunate that they wait, that it usually takes till someone's in college before they find out, there's all these different ways to learn things. It would be nice if they could do that in earlier in people's educations, because not everyone's going to make it to college. On the same token, I think that throwing out the idea of people learning basic reading and math is a terrible idea, Oregon. But that's a side note. Sorry.
I was not aware of that, Oregon.
Yeah, they're trying to pass a law that allows people to graduate high school without basic reading and basic math skills.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's really scary to me.
I don't go to that extent, right?
Yeah.
We all need the basics. We got to have the basics to survive. We got to be able to go to the grocery store, give the guy a $20 bill and get the right change back, right? So no, I don't go to that extreme. But what I do say is that we need to provide more options. Just like you said, Joel.
Yeah.
There is a certain segment of the population, a high percentage, that will not complete their piano lesson. And it's for whatever reason. They don't have time. They're not technical enough or whatever. They don't have the natural ability, and I'm here to serve that subset of the population.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful thing, and it's probably a big part of the population. A huge part of the population.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting because I play a percussion instrument and I play drum set. If you're a percussionist, you learn like a piano player. Percussionists usually learn in starting early in their school career, and they learn to read music just like piano music because orchestras have percussion parts. Most of the time that I meet drummers, or a lot of them, not all of them, they learn from playing. Someone taught them how to play. They started playing with bands. They learn more and more and more, and eventually maybe they learn how to read. I mean, it's different if someone goes to college for percussion and learns drum set, but it just seems like a lot. It's kind of the opposite for drums. That a lot of times, and this is how it was for me. I learned how to read after I'd played a while, and then I realized if I could read, it would really help. And occasionally now someone gives me a part that's written out, and boy, I'm so glad that I learned how to read music. And it is another language, but it's not like, it's not as foreign as, say, Chinese or Japanese.
Oh, no.
It's more like learning German.
It's funny you say German, because, yeah. No, I agree. And, my method is really like a stepping stone for some, and for others, it's what they'll rock out with. I don't close the door on any other form of learning. I'm just a new way that is helping other people.
Yeah, and that's great. That's great. And so, where can people find out about this stuff? Let's get into that. How do people find out about how to controlshiftpiano.com?
Yes, controlshiftpiano.com. And if you go directly to controlshiftpiano.com/templates, you can download a free copy of a piano template. I can show you what it looks like right here for those on video. Is that what you thought it would look like, Joel?
Not really. I mean, I was starting to visualize it.
Did you want me to hold it up again?
Yeah, hold that up for one more second.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's more like, it's interesting because it looks like the test pattern on a television a little bit. You're maybe not old enough to even know that.
No, I don't think I'm old enough to.
Used to be test patterns that would come up when a channel signed off that looked a little bit like that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty cool. It helps people to know what to do, and the pressure is gone. You just sit there, chill out, and follow the patterns on the piano template. So
that's awesome. Have you thought about animating it? Have you thought about making it into sort of an animated type program where they can follow, where it moves along and they can follow it? Or do you have?
I've considered that, but if I were to do it, it would be in a different way than what is currently being done. Because what I see on the animations, they just go so quickly, and they're helpful. But I take pride in the fact that this is something that it relaxes you. You don't have to worry about any moving parts and pieces, and it's just so simple. I just really want to keep it simple.
That's awesome. That's awesome, because I think that's extremely helpful for people learning anything, any kind of a thing. So do you have a job outside of the piano?
Yes, I do. I work right now as a design engineer.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds like it's the same area. I mean, you're designing something.
When I think about my career and also other factors, I'm a programmer. I have a love for music and a design engineer. So all these elements actually came together in a way I never knew it would. And it, formed itself into this thing that I'm doing right now with piano. So,
yeah, that's awesome. So did you go to school for engineering?
Actually,
how did you get into that?
I did to a degree. I didn't get a degree in it, but I did go to school for CAD design. And I just stuck with that for years. I've been in that for, oh man, I don't know how long, quite a while. Right. So along the way, I picked up programming and just never knew where it would lead me to.
Mm-hmm. And so are you able to, do you go to an office now or are you working at home? What's the situation there?
It's just beginning to open up more and more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I go out, I see most people with no mask, and it's everybody's returning to work, returning to grocery stores and things like that. So it's beginning to go back to work here in Texas.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that's what I hear on the news, but you never know.
Yeah.
Never know by the news.
It almost looks normal. You know what I mean? It's weird because we've been walking around with these masks for good reason, I'm sure. But it almost looks normal out there, which is strange.
Yeah, we're not there yet in Oregon, but we're getting there. We still have masks. People are starting to take them off for outside, anything outside. But we still, anytime you go in a business, they want you to wear masks. At least where I am. Some parts of Oregon, that's probably not true, but yeah, where I am, everyone wears a mask inside. So it's almost weird because we're starting to get relaxed about not wearing it, and I'm vaccinated, so I'm really feeling pretty safe.
Right.
But so you forget when you go in a store sometimes that they do want you to wear it. Yeah.
But yeah, and that sounds interesting how they're doing it different everywhere. Here it seems like it's on the honor system. You go into the grocery store and they got a sign that says, if you've been vaccinated, you can not wear a mask. Well, who knows who's been vaccinated? Nobody knows.
Right.
Starbucks, I think they're still requiring a mask. So there's still certain stores, I guess, that have their own standards.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We're in the category like with our infection rate and stuff where we should be doing that, it seems like. But I think enough businesses aren't there yet. Like they're not ready to risk their employees' health to that level. So
I understand that.
Yeah, I completely understand that, 100%. And I don't know how I should feel very safe because according to all the data and all the science, which I believe, the vaccine's supposed to be very effective. But just not sure about all that stuff.
Yeah, some things we never know, right?
Right.
I think we've seen the numbers decline in some areas. I know in my area, it was around the start of the year that we really saw. January, I think, was the worst in my area, but oh man, it just took a nosedive as far as the amount of people with the virus. So it's positive.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I think I'm talking about the virus on every podcast now. So.
Well, it's still relevant, right?
It is.
We've been living in this for, what is it, a year and some change, right?
A year plus. And that's what's so bizarre about just suddenly shifting and going back to normal. And it's such a surprise because it's a surprise, one, that the rates are going down so fast. Because I didn't expect that, especially because there's a lot of people that don't want to get vaccinated. So I didn't think the rates would be dropping like they are in most states, and definitely in Oregon. I mean, it's plummeting. So now, I mean, the whole idea was to make the hospitals able to take patients. That was the idea of lockdown. And we seem to be there. I mean, the hospitals can handle the load that they're getting. It's just, everyone's in shock. I don't know. And I'm one of those people. I'm like, I'm just not sure how ready I am to just go back to what I was doing. I mean, I'm ready, but mentally it's a shock.
Well, yeah, me too. I want to be maskless as much, I feel somewhat safe. Like I feel a barrier around myself, but I'm still throwing on the mask every now and then, just to be safe, just to be extra safe.
And are you back in the office, or were you always a work at home person? I mean, some people just work at home.
No, my company was very, old school with that. But, of course, we went home. Now they want everybody back into the office as much as possible. So they haven't done a return to work 100%, but as soon as they get the green light, I'm sure they will.
But they haven't yet. So because some companies have. So
right.
Yeah, that's fortunate that they haven't because
I think we learned a lot about having a flexible work situation. There are some gains that we got from family time to, downtime to not have to be in traffic. So there's some benefits that I think come from being remote. Then there's some other things that you gain from being in the office interacting.
Yeah, I'm still, well, definitely, I mean, obviously you get to be around people, you get to socialize with people. I think a lot of places were finding there was a lot of wasted time that the majority of people perhaps got more work done at home. The amazing thing to me is I stopped driving. I walked to work anyway, and my wife took a bus, but we started shopping less. We would buy a bunch at a time, and we started figuring out when we needed something, we would figure out how to do it in the shortest amount of time possible. So we are still doing that. And it's just bizarre. I have to have a trickle charger on my car because the battery dies because it's sitting so long. It's really weird.
It is weird. And I'm trying to think of the last time I've been in the Costco or, it's different.
Yeah.
It'll be a lot of firsts going back and trying to be normal.
Right. It'll be a shift. It'll be a huge shift. I'm wanting a new car and I have no idea why. I never even drive.
Hey, get some new shoes. You walk to work anyway. You'll be
there
good.
You go. Yeah. Well, now I don't do anything. I'm pretty much retired except for the podcast. So yeah.
Well, hey.
Now I just hang out. Yeah. I'm very, very fortunate that way.
Oh,
Extremely fortunate. So is there anything else that I forgot to ask you?
No, I don't, I'm just an open book about it. I don't think there's anything you forgot to ask me. If you got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. I think I've
gone on about just about everything. We were talking about Malcolm Gladwell for just a second. I did want to, do you listen to his podcast?
I have not listened to his podcast at all. The last thing I actually listened to him was his book, Talking to Strangers. Mm-hmm. I got the audio book, and I was amazed. I could not believe it.
That really blows my mind because that's what I'm reading right now.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I probably should read it, but listening. So he narrates the audio book too, and he's got some live audio from the actual events as they occurred. It is amazing. I rarely review anything on Amazon, but I was wowed.
All right, that makes me want to now go get the audiobook. I'm actually reading it from a library. I don't know if people remember those. But
what is that?
Yeah. We have a great online library set up, so I can download it and read it. But I think they have the audiobook too. And knowing from what you just told me, now I want to get the audiobook. That is an amazing, amazing book. But I think you would love, his podcast is Revisionist History.
Okay.
And I think you would love it because not only is it Malcolm Gladwell, but he is, the stories are incredible. Like the episodes, and they're 30 minutes. So they're fairly short. A real podcast should be over an hour, right? And but he also he's the opposite of me. He produces it like a bunch. He probably has a team helping him produce. It's they'll go to different clips and they'll go to different he'll interview different people about the story, and it's just amazing because it's like the book, but each episode is a different piece of history and delving into pieces of history that I didn't even think about. I think there's 2 or 3 seasons of it. So yeah, definitely something you might want to check out.
So yeah, I will. I mean, that's another example of the new age of learning. We can learn so much from just listening to history taught to us in a different way, right? Through a podcast or through a YouTube, it doesn't matter.
It's true. I mean, I would like to say it doesn't matter, but apparently it does matter because some of the information put out there is not the best. Not
No,
the
that's
best.
true.
We talked about that in my last podcast, so we don't need to go into that now. But
You got another hour. Stick around.
Exactly. It's oh boy. Of course, this podcast is all factual. Everything said is 100% correct. So this is where you should get all your information all day long. Well, hey, it's been great having you on the show. I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you reaching out. That's awesome.
You. I feel very privileged to have been able to tell you what I was still talking about.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm still talking.
You're still talking, and you will keep talking about it even after the podcast. You will keep talking. It's great to have you on. I love to hear about new methods of learning. That's important stuff. It's cool. And I guess I'll just go. Where was that? You've been listening to Were You Still Talking? This is Joel Albrecht, and my guest today has been Stephen Jenkins, or Steve if you prefer. And we've been talking about new ways of learning and a whole bunch of other stuff. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you listen to all the other podcasts and share them. I mean, it's totally okay to share it with your friends. This is it's not a secret podcast or anything. You're welcome to help me make it grow. This is something I forget to ask people all the time, but I sure appreciate you listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been a guest on the show. That's great. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, then reach out. If you can't find my information through all the podcast sites or the YouTube, then never mind. Come on. All right. So, as I always say, be good to each other and be good to yourself.